Hello, everyone. I am Tenitria Williams, and welcome back to Minding My Mental Health. You guys know what I want you to do. Hashtag live if you are watching us live, and let us know where you're watching from. And hashtag replay and let us know where you are watching from. I have two very amazing guests. I'm really super excited. This is my first time having two people that is not a couple on. And so I just wanted to talk about therapy, counseling, getting into the mental health space. Of course, the purpose for this broadcast is to tear down the stigma and with mental health in our community. And when I say our community, meaning our community at large, but specifically the African American community. And so that's one of the goals. The other goal is to bring awareness to our community about things that we can do to better take care of ourselves. And so, what I'm going to ask each lady to do, this should be broadcasting on my site. So, I'm going to ask you both to send it to yourself. Let me see, and I can even tag you here. Make sure
Okay.
it's broadcasting.
Get into the social media.
Yeah, there we go. Somebody already shared it.
And it's on your page, Tenitria?
On my page. I'm going to tag you.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Oh, you already see it.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
And you can share this to any groups you may be a part of. Again, any kind of area that you want to share. All right, let's get started. So I see a couple people are joining us. Go ahead, hashtag where you're watching from, hashtag live if you're watching live. Share this, tag your friends, tag your family members. Why? Because we are going to get some good information today, and I'm really super excited. So I'm actually going to just let the ladies introduce themselves. And we are all LPC, is that correct? We're all LPCs, if I'm not mistaken, when I was doing the flyers. And so I think this is a great opportunity. I think it's a great opportunity for you guys to be able to hear different perspectives, but all different professional perspectives. And so I'm going to start with Coretta. I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your practice, and then we'll pass the mic to Vivica so she can introduce herself.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Coretta Woodard, and I am a licensed professional counselor, and we call it LPC for short. And I actually practice in Bentonville, Arkansas, and I founded a private practice called the People Place Counseling Center. And at the People Place Counseling Center, I was really called to launch that center to really target the marginalized communities in the Bentonville area. And so our focus there is a place for all people. And our target audience is the marginalized community, to include people of color, the LGBTQ plus community, and people that otherwise may not feel comfortable or safe in other settings. I've been a therapist now for about 12 years. And I always tell people that being a therapist is a call for me. It's not actually something that I do, but it's a burden that God has given me. And my platform has just kind of shifted. And so now my platform is a red chair that's housed in my office. And I love to be able to help people. And my clinical niche is people, hurting people.
Vivica, can you introduce yourself and tell us more about you and your practice?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Tanisha, for having me on today. I'm Vivica Johnson. I am a licensed professional counselor. As my colleague has explained, that's an LPC that we say for short. I'm also an LPC supervisor, which means I supervise interns who are coming into the field as well. I have been in the mental health field for probably about 20 years. I've been an LPC for about 15 years. And I would say as well, Coretta, that I do feel that this is not just a career, but it is a calling. It's what I'm purposed to do. I specialize in my practice We focus a lot on families and marriages and women issues. We do some general things. I always say we're generalists as well, where we do, your mood disorders, anxiety, depression, it's interpersonal work if we need to do that as well. But we really do focus on couple work and working with families. And so we I've been in practice. I started the practice in 2015. Before that, I had experience in community mental health and collegiate mental health. I worked at LSU as a senior mental health clinician for a few years there and worked with an amazing team there. And I think that's allowed me to love working with young adults. So I do love working with young adults and helping them transition. I tell clients and I ought to encourage them and affirm them in their transition. But I also tell people in general that many times in our world that we have a blueprint of what's next. You go from elementary school, you go to middle school, you go to high school. But then when you're graduating from college, that's usually the first time you don't really have a clear picture of what's next. And so that transition and that adjustment can be really tough and difficult to navigate. So walking with many young adults as they're making that adjustment. Also, besides counseling, I am a pastor and love serving my community. I'm a community leader here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I didn't even say actually where I'm from, where my practice is, which is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And but I am a Mississippi girl. I am from Natchez, Mississippi, but my practice and have been here. And I graduated from Loyola University of New Orleans, and is where I got my degree as well. And so I love working with. Our population. I love being a person in this field that can um, tear down the stigmatism around mental health, and that I like to tell people that looking at mental health as a spectrum is a good way to do that. You may have severe psychosis on one end, but on the other end, it's just maybe I want to explore more about self and more about me, and you can come in for any of that. And so I think what we do is really hard work and a part of God's work, and so I'm honored to do it.
I love it. Thank you both. And I guess I never do this on the broadcast. I guess I should tell a little bit about kind of the population I work with as well.
Yeah.
So I've been LPC, I want to say about 17 years. I'm not totally sure on that number, but it's around 17 years. I love working with couples. That is probably my favorite. Couples, young adults. Um, I have worked a lot with little children. After a while, I think I prefer older, like the older not older children. If I'm going to be with children, but mostly I prefer adults. But again, I've worked from teen or little kids all the way up to the geriatric population, and so what I really again love is working with couples and working with individuals who are just ready. And like Vivica was saying, when we talk about mental health, sometimes people only think of that extreme example of having a breakdown or something, but mental health is all encompassing. And that's why I like to talk about mental health, not always the mental illness aspect of it, because people often don't realize that when we don't deal with our mental health, it can become mental illness. Right. And I tell people all the time, let's take care of our health so that we don't have to get sick. If we take care of our health, even that's in the physical, if we're taking care of our health, oftentimes we can avoid sickness. So let's jump into this conversation, ladies. Speaking of stigma and all of that, what are some things you wish people understood about counseling, the mental health profession, or not necessarily profession, but about mental health in general? What are some of those things?
You want me to start? I didn't want to jump in.
Okay.
Either one. Vivica, go for it.
Okay. I think kind of what I was saying even in my introduction is that, that it's a spectrum, right? And so that it doesn't mean that you're crazy because you're taking care of yourself, right? And that I love the slogan that Dr. Anita Phillips, someone that I glean from afar, she says that prayer is a weapon and therapy is a strategy, and you need both to win the battlefield of the mind. And so, even as many times in our culture, faith is hugely important in our culture, and we have used faith as a place of where, like, how to deal with my emotions and to deal with
Mhm.
my thoughts and my mind. And so, you don't have to put one to the side to pick up the other, but you can use both and it could be
Mhm.
successful. And so, I think the biggest thing is that, hey, whatever it is that you're using that's healthy, that's a coping skill, that's a part of your life that centers you, you can add therapy to that. Even if it's as simple as you are someone that works out all the time, right? We know that when you work out and you get that heart rate up, the same thing that happens when you take an antidepressant, your body naturally does that, right?
Mhm.
And so that could be used with therapy. And so it doesn't mean that I have to take away or move away from something that I use that work that helps centers me, that help, with my mental health, my emotional well-being, but I can add therapy a part of that. And then I think the other thing is that um, I like to, when I'm talking in the community, I always remind people of this. Whenever we are physically sick, we go to the doctor. If I have high blood pressure or
Mhm.
diabetes, I go see my general practitioner. If I'm having stuff going on with my mind and my heart, you go see a therapist. God has put us in the earth as vessels
Yes.
to do that work. And so um, that's my two big things of saying, hey, I wish people get that and understand that it doesn't have to be that something is completely wrong or devastated before I
Mhm.
seek out the help that I need.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love both of those, Vivica. And I guess I'll just piggyback because I think what people do not recognize is therapy can be very practical. And that's what
Mhm.
you really kind of described. And one of the
Mhm.
things that I try to do is consider my client, consider what they're already doing and what is working, and just apply it therapeutically. And then that just kind of segues me to my big thing. And one of my sayings is therapy works if you work it. It's not
Mhm.
osmosis. Just because you're coming, it does not mean things are going to get better. But whatever tools you get in therapy, you got to work those tools because we
Mhm.
can have an amazing session and I can fill your toolbox. But if you're not going to use those tools in the moment when you need it, then guess what? It's not my fault as your therapist. It's not that therapy isn't working. It's because you're not using the tools that you get. So if you're considering therapy, you got to recognize that it's a partnership. And me as a therapist, I'm going to always hold you accountable and not work harder than you. So therapy works if you work it. You just got to work the tools. But I'm always willing as a therapist to fill your toolbox. But I'm going to assess, are you using your tools? How did you respond? What happened this time? What's the wins? What's the growth? So that we can see that what you're learning, you're actually applying. So therapy works if you work it.
Yeah, go ahead and put that in the comments. Therapy works if you work it. And I think that's a huge part. I've had people come in and say, "We've been doing this for a month." Go, well, let's stay right there. Let's
Yes.
adjust and see what's going on when we're coming in. These are the insights we're getting, but when we leave, are you following through with what we're talking about? And I think that's so important for people to understand in general.
Yes. Yeah.
You
Yes.
know,
Yeah, that's so
you
important. Like I even have that like in my declaration of practice, like client responsibilities. Hey, this is what I
know.
need you to do, right? Because it's like you said, like I always say, you get out of it what you put in.
Mhm.
And so if you're just putting
Absolutely.
in these 45 to 50 minutes, well, it's gonna take us a long time to reach these goals if you're not doing your homework, if you're not doing these readings, if you're not making the changes that we're talking about in the room together, you have
Yes.
to do your part. That's where we
Yes.
really see the great progress. Yeah,
And
it's
I
so good.
think, Vivica, you mentioned you're a pastor. I
Mhm.
think you see that often in the Christian community in general, just this idea of I want to come and I really kind of want God to take this weight off of me. I really want him to give me these six packs. I want, the money to just show up in my account. And we're expecting these things literally to be magic.
Mhm.
And therapy is not magic. God is not magic.
That's right.
Life is not this magical place where we just we flow through the tulips and go, oh, it's going to work out beautifully. Oh no, we have to actually put in the work and to do those
Yeah.
things, right? Both of you kind of talked about having a lot of history working with people, right? And so anytime you're in this field, you've had to deal with, or the people you deal with have had some type of trauma. We've been learning a lot about just the responses of trauma, right? Can you speak to, and this is for both people, can you speak to how trauma shapes people and how it shows up in people's lives? Because I think so many times what I see is people are still holding on to things that once worked for them, that was once actually beneficial, maybe, or helpful, and now it's no longer there, and they can't figure out why this thing that I'm doing is not helping me. Can you guys talk about how trauma impacts the life, the brain, the body?
Yeah. I guess I'll start. So the one thing we know, and every therapist is going to say, is our body keeps the score, right? And so for us, a lot of times, and I'm gonna just talk about me, I'm not gonna talk about anybody else, but a lot of times our life experiences, well, all the time, our life experiences shape who we are, how we react, how we respond. And a lot of times, one of the biggest things that happen in therapy is you begin to connect the dots of, why do I always run from a relationship the moment that it's not going good, or the moment that things get hard? Well, because you have a flight response. And so when we talk about trauma responses, we hear the top three, and then they've added two additional ones now: fight, flight, or freeze. And then they have friend or flop now. And so, but when I was initially coming up, it was fight, flight, or freeze. And so when traumas happen, our amygdala is activated. And so we're either going to respond from there, and it's going to be fight, flight, or freeze, which is at the back of our brain, or we're going to give ourselves time to regulate and remove that alarm that's going off, to where you can use your frontal cortex to have some reasoning and consider how you should respond. So a very common thing that I have had as a person in my own trauma response, and what I've recognized, is I have become very parentified. And this is a huge trauma response for myself. And that trauma response of parentifying is where you want to help people. You kind of want to become the parent for everybody and help them out and lead them and guide them. Well, that came from the lack of parental guidance that I had when I was younger. And so I became very parentified young. I even had a nickname growing up called Little Mama. And so I didn't understand why I was so parentified, or why I wanted to parent or help everybody, or where that helping came from, but it came from neglect that I had in my upbringing.
Wow. I think that was such a great practical example so people can see it. Vivica, can you speak to how people can start to recognize and have more self-awareness of their own trauma responses? Because again, I think so many people go through life and they're literally unaware of why they do what they do. Can you speak to something that can help people gain more insight?
Yeah, I think it starts with first having that self-awareness, right? You can't have a locus of change until you have awareness of what has happened. And so I like to do a lot of psychoeducation around trauma too, because I think people think trauma is when I have gone to war or when I have been physically or sexually abused. But we all just went through a global trauma.
Right.
Through COVID.
Yeah.
Right. And so I like to put my own definition of trauma is that anything that impacts the safety and the security of your everyday life, that's trauma.
Yep.
It can be little trauma or it can be a big trauma, but little trauma is anything that impacts your safety and your security. And so once you know that, I have to then identify what are my personal triggers, right? And so a lot of times that could be a smell, it could be a song, it could be a location. You may not want to go to Big Mama's house because Big Mama's house is where something happened. that you didn't feel safe and it impacted your safety. And so you have to know what your triggers are. And then once I identify what my triggers are, how do I now put some things in place to regain some safety where I am now back in the driver's seat and not my traumatic experience in the driver's seat? So it may be, hey, if we're having family Thanksgiving at Big Mom's house, then I'm gonna drop off some stuff and then I'm gonna go and be at another family member's house because that's not a place I feel safe at. And so you have to know these are my triggers, and then how do I put things in place to help me cope through it so that I can show up, not be triggered. So because when we're triggered, our body, as Coretta said, keeps the score, right? And so I'm going to have a physiological and an emotional response to that trigger. And so I got to protect myself now. It is not a person's fault that they went through a traumatic experience or experience hurt, but it is your responsibility to heal it. And so this is you being in the driver's seat of healing what has happened to you and how you take care of yourself. I identify my trigger and I find out some coping skills that can help me so that I can manage it.
Okay, I love that definition. And I wanted to just jump on there with, you said anything that impacts the safety or security of my life or something similar. And I wanted to point out, because people still sometimes don't recognize that it still doesn't have to be really traumatic. Safety can be, you keep lying and I don't feel safe enough. You know, that's impacting if I feel safe with you emotionally. If you, you know, don't come through for me, I don't feel safe, even though I may have a roof over my head, I may have food on the table. And so people look and you go, you didn't go through anything traumatic. Well, if your parents constantly lying to you, that can feel traumatic because you don't know what to believe. And so I want people to broaden their idea of, hey, maybe it is okay for me to get counseling, because those are some things. I've had people come in and when you're talking to them and you say something like, the abuse you experienced, and that's the first time in their life that they've ever connected what they experienced was actually abuse, or what they experienced was actually traumatic for them. And it almost gives them a sense of relief, like, I'm not crazy, something really did happen to me that really shook me to my core. So I really love that definition. I love that insight. I want to tell people, if you're watching, if you have questions or comments, put those in there, and we're gonna throw them out there to these professionals who know what they're doing, and let them answer your questions. If you have anything specific we can help you with. I also wanted to talk.
Before we move forward, I wanted to also, because a lot of times when you hear people talk about self-awareness and knowing your triggers, pay attention just to your body, right? Become one with your body. That is so important. That's probably at the top of my list when I'm talking to people about dealing with their mental health. Get to know your body. Know when your heart starts to race. Know when your head starts to feel a certain type of way. Know when your hands start to sweat, you know, or when you feel that nervousness or your knee starts to shake. But really become one with your body. And you can do that by having just a few minutes, you know, of mindfulness. You know what? I feel my hand touching my hair. You know, I feel my fingers. You know, just become really one with your body, because that is probably the first step to really self-awareness and recognizing trauma. Because I can't tell you how many clients come in and they say, oh, I had a really great childhood. You know, everything was great. You know, I've never had any trauma. You know, everything's amazing. And the moment you start to talk and really unpack things, like, oh, I didn't even know that happened. Or I didn't realize that that wasn't okay. And so I would just say, be one with yourself. Know your body, know what's going on. And when you make a change, listen.
Yeah. Coretta, you just said something I wanted to piggyback off of. You were saying you start to point out to them some of the things that they've not even recognized. And that to me is the benefit of going somewhere where you are safe. You start to shake and go, I'm noticing as you talk about that, you get fidgety. As you talk about this, you start to hold yourself. Tell me what's going on. And then they start to have that. It helps with their self-awareness. And so Being able to have a professional who's trained to look at those things and say, I'm seeing this. You tell me you're happy, but your body language is telling me something else. Let's talk about that. That opens the door for more self-awareness. We have a question here. It says, how do you handle intimate relationships with your mate when asked for something that has a negative feeling to you? How do you handle an intimate
extremely
relationship?
honest. That takes a lot of vulnerability and honesty to say, hey, I know that's something that you desire that just doesn't feel good to me. And if your mate is loving and supportive, they're going to say, okay, it doesn't feel good. We don't have to do it. But you have to be extremely honest and extremely vulnerable, because if it doesn't feel good, you have to set that physical boundary. I'm not doing that.
And I think to add to that, if you haven't created a culture in your relationship where you have those safe, courageous conversations, you have to create that before you bring that up. Because if you bring it up in an argument, or if you bring it up and there's distress, then your partner may not hear you. And so one of the things that I give a practical tool to couples is start having about 20 minutes out of a day in the week, just 20 minutes. That is just our check-in with each other, and check in and say, hey, how are you feeling? Hey, let me tell you how I feel. This is what I appreciate. This is some things I think we can work on. And the safeguard of that is we're not going to argue about what we talk about here. Like, this is just us talking. And so then when you create that, then I can come and tell you the courageous thing of, hey, I want to share this with you. That doesn't really make me feel good, because you've already practiced creating that culture in your relationship.
Yeah.
Good question.
I would also just add to that, and the idea of you actually doing some self-exploration as to what is it about that is negative for you. Is that connected to some trauma that possibly you haven't ever dealt with? Or it may even be something that, your partner says, hey, I want you to do this. And go, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you know why I don't like that? Because my mom, every time I try to hug her, she would reject me. So I don't like people coming up to hug. Oh, well, maybe that's something I actually don't dislike with my husband. I just had connected it to a negative experience. But if you don't do that self work to figure out kind of what's going on, that I think also can kind of keep being a cycle. And so I would say definitely setting those boundaries, definitely creating that culture and doing the internal work as well, figuring out. And like Coretta said, if your partner is a loving partner and you go, oh, this is tied to something that happened to me in the past, or this is what's going on, they're going to say, okay, well, how can we both get our needs met in a healthy way without violating your needs, without violating the things that have happened to you or the things that you're uncomfortable with? Very good question. You guys keep them coming if you have additional questions. Ladies, you both obviously are on social media. Social media can bring this great avenue for us to bring awareness and insight. It can also bring a lot of misinformation, to say the least, right? And so the terms now that I constantly hear are, my ex was a narcissist, and because everybody's ex apparently is a narcissist, and they always gaslight me. So when we think about those things, when we hear that everybody's gaslighting and everybody's ex is a narcissist, how do we bring balance to terms that really are legitimate terms, right? Those things really do happen. There are people who have narcissism. There are people who actually gaslight, but everybody doesn't. And so sometimes it feels like it's just really trendy to say those things, or sometimes it feels like it's the diagnosis of the month. When I was in school, bipolar was felt like bipolar was the diagnosis of the evening. Everybody was diagnosed. I was like, wait a minute now, guys, everybody cannot have this same disorder.
Yes.
And apparently you guys, I'm telling everybody, I was like, everybody has this. But anyways, I digress. Do you think social media is helping tear down the stigma? Or I guess I should ask, how is social media impacting mental health when you see the information / the misinformation that's out there?
I think you get a little bit of both, kind of like with anything. I think, social media puts everything in your face. And so I think it allows an opportunity for people to talk about their mental health, maybe not be in the most healthy way. I was like, you could have probably put that in your journal and not a post. However, I do think it does some destigmatizing of that. It's okay to get help. I was at I can't remember exactly where I was, but I was having a conversation and someone mentioned a recent episode that was on The Shy. I don't know if either of you watched that. But it's a pretty good show, comes on Showtime. And what happened in the episode was that one of the star characters is a male who's a councilman now, and he brought in a therapist and they had a group session for nothing but men. And so from that episode, it went to social media, and all these men are talking about their emotions and talking about, hey, as Black men, especially, we don't have a safe place to really process how we feel. Like, oh, I would love to have something like that. I would love for, a group of men where we can really be vulnerable and really share how we really feel. Because usually when we get together, we're just talking about sports or the event that's happening around us and not really sharing our emotions, right? And so great thing that social media kind of brought to the attention. But I think you have the other side of the coin of that, is where you do have this misinformation, right? And so I'm so tickled when you said my ex is a narcissist. I probably can count on my hands, my toes of when I've heard it just this past month, right? And so um, one of the things I do is I ask people, okay, so tell me, what is your definition? What do you think that is? Or what did Google tell you, right? And then right here on my desk, I'm saying, okay, now let me tell you kind of what this really is. Okay. And so I think it's a part of our job as therapists, like we're also gatekeepers, right? And so I want to be able to tell you the truth and what the real research says that has some reliability and validity to it of what you think is happening, or the misconception that you may have gotten from social media about these popular terms that come about every so often, so that you have real information and the correct information.
Right. One of the comments says my ex definitely is a narcissist, but I had some narcissistic tendencies as well. And I think that's the other part. Sometimes we go into therapy and we're wanting to figure out how to fix everybody around us.
Yeah.
And rather than going, but let me look at my own tendencies over here and let me see what's going on internally and how I'm influencing this situation or how I'm responding in these situations. So of course, I'm an advocate for therapy and therapists. But I do think it's important that we go in with that idea of understanding that therapy really is about us and our reaction and our responses and what's going on with us, and not changing everybody around us.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important for us. What are some things that you are seeing lately, kind of trends in mental health? Maybe I'm seeing a lot of this starting, or I'm seeing a lot of these things happening. What are some things that you ladies are seeing in your practice?
I think the biggest trend that I'm seeing is, one, there's more psychoeducation that's out there about mental health disorders. And so I'm seeing a lot of people already come in with their own diagnoses of, oh, I believe that this is what, I'm dealing with. And it kind of goes back even to the MPD. When we're dealing with personality disorders, I would encourage everybody to understand that personality disorders are serious. And it's not these one-off, one environment situations of how people act and how people respond. And so I would be very careful with our language, because what we speak out of our mouth, even what we're typing on social media, we don't want to speak those things over people, and we don't want to speak those things over ourselves. I think it's a good thing to recognize that you have certain tendencies and address them, but you don't have to label them or put a diagnosis on them. Another thing that I'm seeing more now, which I think is a great thing, and I think it would be better if therapists and coaches could partner more, because I'm seeing a lot of coaching.
Yes.
And I think coaching is really good. And honestly, it's a gift to us as therapists. However, I think it would be better if we could become better pairs, to where, hey, if you're coaching someone and they feel pretty stuck and they're not able to do the things that you think they really should be done as a coach, you don't got to overwork. Partner with the therapist and say, hey, I'm coaching this person and they seem stuck in this area. And so I don't get frustrated. And so that I can coach them effectively, I think they need some help therapeutically, because with coaching, they're going to carry you forward. But us as therapists, we're going to go back and deal with what may be anchoring you down. And so we want to be able to, I think if we could have more partnering with coaching, I think we can really help the whole person. So that's kind of my trend that I'm
now.
seeing.
Listen, I just want to. Where's the offering that I can give you? Because
that's
golden,
good.
Coretta, because there's so many times that I would get clients that have come from coaches, or it seemed like they were maybe trying to practice things that are outside of their scope of practice. But if we could have partnered together, that would have been amazing collaboration here that we could have given to a client. And so I think that's great. I think we have to know our role. And I think a part of that is also we have to start educating the community around that, because it can be confusing, guys. Like, we know that we're LPCs, but you got LPCs, you got social workers, now you got coaches, you got psychologists and psychiatrists, and they're all like, where do I go?
Right.
Who do I go to? Because there's so many different clinicians or helpers that I don't know which would best fit for me. And so I think we have to do better around educating that too.
Absolutely.
No, you hit it on the head, both of you. And I was going to say kind of what Vivica was saying. I think it's important for coaches to recognize, hey, this is outside of what I'm trained to do. Because I've had people to come in and go, no, I've been getting coaching, but this is what they were telling me. And sometimes it could be counterproductive if you don't give the right information or have the right tools. And I don't ever think it comes from a negative place in the coach's heart, right? I think it's just a matter of going, oh, wait. But like you said, Coretta, I have a partner who can help you through this. And then even for us to say, you know what, you're doing really well here. I think this person could really help you to run a little faster. We've done some of this groundwork, but I think this program or this person could really help you to move forward, and recognizing we don't have to be in competition. Really, we can be in collaboration, because there is enough trauma and drama in the world that we can all have jobs for the rest of our lives. So we don't have to feel a sense of competition. Go out there and do this work to really help people. I want to know, ladies, for your own selves, how have you dealt with, go ahead, Vivica.
I wanted to just share quickly a trend. I think it can be important, especially for our community. When I saw this question, I went in to pull some stats. Not that I'm personally seeing this a lot in my office, but I see it in our community. And that is that we're having a really big increase around suicide, and in the Black community. I was recently on a phone conversation with someone earlier this morning about young Black male in law enforcement who recently took his life. And so I think it used to be, we would say, oh, Black people, we don't do that. But what I've seen in just the CDC reported that there's a 15% increase in suicide among minorities.
Wow.
And in Louisiana, where I am, there's a 20% increase. And so it is letting us know that there are a lot of people that are hurting and they don't know what to do about that. And they're making a final decision about it. And so it is important that you know that there are many resources out here, from crisis hotlines to therapist office to even just going to your emergency room or hospital that has mental health services that you can seek out before making that decision to end your life. And it's okay to not be okay and to ask for help. And we have to start saying that more in our community of color, because we're seeing some of the impact of that for sure.
No, that's definitely a trend that I've seen, Vivica. And what I'll see, oftentimes people will put it out there, even on social media. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm barely hanging on.
yeah,
I'm ready to give up. And people, and again, it's just they don't know what else to do. You got it. You okay? It'll be fine. And all of that is encouraging. But I want us to really encourage people, hey, reach out. And I've started seeing more actually people, my home is really small, and they'll go, reach out to Tanitria. She's a counselor. She can help you do so and so. Or they'll tag me, hey, call, text her or contact her. And I'm happy that people are saying, hey, let's not just blow this off. Let's not think that this is just attention seeking behavior. This is real. People are hurting. People are struggling. And so when you see that, I want to encourage you all to encourage the person, hey, it's okay if you need to call a professional. There is no judgment. It's okay for you to call this hotline to do those things, because again, it is super important.
Yes.
Trying to read here. Oh yeah, suicidal tendencies are such a lie of the enemy. Absolutely. Absolutely, Chris. Again,
yeah,
it's important for us to understand that people don't always recognize it's a lie in the moment. We can
mhm,
see it from the outside, and it seems like a obvious, oh, that's a lie. People love you. Look at all these things, but in that moment, their eyes have been covered with scales, and so it's important that we can get them the right help with the right people, and get them to safety.
Absolutely.
Why is it that churches don't deal with mental illness? That's a question um, from
Well,
the audience. Why is it that churches don't deal with mental illness? I'll let Vivica take this one first, and then I'll jump in. And Coretta, you can feel free.
um, I think historically, it's been a lack of knowledge, and I think also you've had pastors, and not coming from ill intent, but trying to use faith or religion as the only tool to work through what people may be dealing with in their mental health, are, trying to just find the answers on their own. And sometimes when we can do that, we can do more harm than we doing good. Um, and so I think that it is important, just like we talked about with in the field of coaches and therapists, like you have to partner. If you don't have a therapist in your congregation, then partner with someone in the community so that you can have that resources for the people that serve your ministry, because it is essential. If I am having a hallucination, I am not possessed by a demonic spirit, but I'm having a hallucination and I may need to see a therapist, and I may need to get a medication evaluation and get the treatment that I need, right?
yeah.
I think it is important that, I think it's amazing. If you put faith and therapy together, I think it is an amazing collaboration. I've seen it happen. I think for me personally, because I am a therapist, if I don't see it in my church, I go to my leader and we find a way to do it. So I haven't been in a church that didn't necessarily have it, because I would always say, hey, it's not here. How can I help to make sure we have this? And so there are churches that are doing it. There are churches that are doing it really well. There are even churches that even have counselors on their staff. There are some that even have counseling centers that are attached even through their ministry, and some that have, just collaboration with people in the community as well, of having a resource list for you. If nothing else, hey, this is not something that the church has to offer, but here are some resources in the community that we have for you, and we'll make sure that you get landed somewhere to get the help that you need. And so I think it's just that place where we have to have more conversations about it. We have to be open about it, and we have to collaborate.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that, Coretta, or?
I think I would piggyback off of what Vivica said. I don't think we can say that the church as a whole is not addressing mental health, because I do believe that there are a lot of pastors who are even preaching about it across the pulpit. And I believe that's a trend that we're seeing, that it's becoming more acceptable, especially in church as an organization, as a big organization. However, I would also say, when I talked about the partnership, even with the coaches, and Vivica mentioned that, I think that's probably what we do need more of, because I do think it is harder for people to see a therapist that may be in their congregation, or one that goes to the church. But being able to create a resource, because I see a lot of churches that offer a lot of outreach, a lot of resources, but being able to partner with a therapist that has no affiliation with your church and say, hey, you're going to be our person. Now, of course, it's important to know that it's going to be, spiritually sound, and it's going to be, not contrary to whatever the mission is of the church. I'm sure the pastor is going to be looking into that. But being able to partner outside to send people to a safe place, to where it doesn't feel hard, because I do think it will be hard for some people to deal with the harder things. And religious trauma has also become kind of a clinical niche that I have. And it's not something I sought out to start working with, but just by way of us going through the global pandemic, different things happening, it just kind of became a part of my ministry. And the one thing is people may not feel safe to deal with the harder things right within the church. But if we can create, outreaches to partner outside of the church with licensed providers, then I think that could be, beautiful.
I agree 100%. We have another question from the audience. It says, what are the best atmospheres to help men open up and talk?
I think that it's always about emotional safety. And I think you can't create an atmosphere for men without men. And
say
so
that again.
you got to have men to be a part of that. That's not something that I think that even as a therapist, I can lead, but I can partner with, right? But it has to be something that they see themselves in, and where they can feel safe enough to be vulnerable and be transparent and say the things that they need to process and work through. So they have to see themselves. And so it's a charge that I think that men have to be a part of. I think we can support, we can rally around as women, but we can't lead the charge of that. Men have to be leading that for them to feel safe.
Good. Any other insight, Coretta?
I'm going to speak as a wife, because being a therapist and being a wife, I remember desperately wanting to be that safe space for my husband, right? It's like, man, why not? People pay me to be their safe space.
I know what I'm doing, right?
Of course, I'm a safe space. And I remember desperately wanting to be that for him, and also not understanding why I wasn't. But as we have grown, and I'm a safe space for a lot of things for my husband, but there's a lot of things to where he's not going to look to me to be that safe space for him. And I have to be okay with that and recognize that he knows what a safe space is for him. I don't have to dictate or figure that out for him, but he is able to connect with the right people, get in the right space, connect with his therapist, because There's certain things he'll talk to his therapist about that we don't get to talk about. And I've become okay with that.
Mhm.
And I think the beautiful part on what you just said, Coretta, was it took your own maturity to be okay with that. And I think sometimes as women, we want to be everything for our, especially our husbands. We want to be all
Yes.
things for that. Then, no, why would you want to call your boy? You got me. I don't want to talk to you right now. I want to talk to my boy. And I think that's the part of us growing and saying, hey, I can be safe, meaning I'm not going to do anything that's going to cause harm. I'm not going to be judgmental or critical. I think that part is important when you're talking about building safety, but also recognizing that I also can't be everything to another person. And that's across the board, not your husband. I bet, yeah, go play ball and talk.
Yeah.
Go do that thing, lift weights and talk it out. Why? Because when we start expecting one person to meet all of our needs, that's too heavy of a burden for that other person.
Codependency.
Yes.
Mhm.
And just recognizing that you can't be your safety just went up as the safe
That's
space.
right.
You know, you're safe because you're saying, I get it. Go have your time, go play ball, go talk. I get it. And so I am somewhat becoming a safe place at that point.
That's right. I was telling a wife I was having a conversation with who's also a therapist. You guys can probably appreciate this for sure. Is that if I show up in my marriage as consistently as his therapist, then he's going to consistently keep showing up as a client when I really need to be the wife because I want him to be my husband.
Yes.
And so when we carry that extra role, we have to manage that because we don't want to be the therapist to our husbands.
No.
I want to
You
be
just
your
help
wife.
somebody.
Yeah.
Yes. And I would say that even extends into any
Friendship.
relationship, your aunts,
Yes.
uncles, your
Yes.
cousins, your friends. I mean, you have to have a good, healthy boundary and don't become that to everybody.
That's right.
No, I 100% agree. Now, I know we're almost out of time. I really want this to go longer, but I'm going to respect everybody's time. What would you say to someone who says, I'm looking for a therapist, but I don't know how to judge if this is a good I looked through my insurance and they said this person accepts my insurance. And so they sent me to Sarah. How do I know that Sarah is a good match? What would you say to how can you figure out if a person's a good fit for you?
You know, I even did this. I would say every good therapist has a therapist. And so I go in and, hey, try it on and see. Right. And so I pick you a few off the list and set up. Most therapists have free consultations where they'll do a consultation with you for anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes to provide what they do, to give you an understanding of who they are and what they practice offer. Go in and see, try it on. If you like it, go and book another session. If you don't, keep till you find the person that you go to that you feel like would be a good fit for you, that you can continue to do treatment with. And even if it's, I'm going to go in for the few intake sessions, which is your first session, that's okay. So you can figure out, do I feel comfortable with this person? Another thing to do, if you have an idea of what you want to work on, read about those therapists and see if that is a specialization that they have or a niche that they have in their practice, so that you have someone that's competent to work with the specific thing that you may want to focus on. Even down to going and look them up and see, there are different websites such as Psychology Today, that allows you to see the person and read more about them and get like a blurb so you can see, hey, do I feel like I can have a connection with this person as I'm reading about them, to give you that information. And so, but the biggest thing, and to reiterate again, is that you can book the session, go in to see, and see if that works for you. I have a therapist, but before I found the one that I liked, I tried like 3 or 4. And until I was like, okay, this is who feels right for me. And
Mhm.
so be open to doing that. I think you would do your best work where you feel the most comfortable, where you can be vulnerable and transparent about your life so they can walk the journey with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would totally agree with everything Vivica said. I think it's a feeling that you have. You know what it feels like when you're safe. And so, just like a therapist is assessing you, assess your therapist. And ask good questions. I would even encourage you, write down questions before you go to your assessment, things that are important to you, things that you want to be able to experience through therapy. Have your questions ready. And when you know your therapist is doing your intake assessment, you do an intake assessment as well. And just know every therapist is a professional. So if you say, hey, this is just not a good fit, a therapist would much rather hear that than drag you along in the therapeutic
Yes.
process. So just know if it's not a good fit, you won't be hurting your therapist's feelings. If you do, that's not your responsibility.
Right.
That's right.
And so just be honest to say, hey, I've tried it. This is not a good fit. You can even ask for some, referrals to say, hey, now that you've met with me, can you give me a few referrals of people that may be best for me? This is kind of what I really want. This is what I think I need. And I don't think I'll get it, with you, but I want to keep going and I want to continue with therapy. Just don't quit, because a lot of times you have a bad experience and you're like, you know what, I'm just not going to do therapy. Keep trying, find your right place. And please do not sit with a therapist that is not a good fit for you, because you don't want to sit there for 6 months to a year and then you're frustrated. And now the next time you go to a therapist, it's harder to work with them and you can't trust them, because I love people that come from another therapist, because I'm like, okay, that therapist has prepared them for therapy with me. But it doesn't feel that way when you hated the process or you didn't gain from it. So listen to yourself, know what you want, and speak up, but keep trying. Don't.
No, I think that perfectly stated, both ladies. That idea of not giving up is what I was gonna kind of piggyback off of. So many times we go, oh, that wasn't a good experience. We don't stop eating at restaurants because we didn't have a good experience. We keep going. And so a part of therapy is even learning how to advocate for yourself, even through that process. This doesn't feel like a connection, and that's okay. I think even that can be therapeutic when people start to recognize that I have the power to say that this relationship isn't the one that I want to work with. It's something freeing of taking your power back to say, oh no, I know that's what the insurance recommended, but let me find somebody else on this insurance list, or let me call and do some research. And like you said, even the therapist, we're a professional. So it's not, we don't take it personally. In fact, we want you to find the person who's the best match for you, because to make everything better for everybody, right? So being really mindful to advocate for yourself. I know, again, we're out of time. So any last words, and how can people reach you if they are in your area?
So
we'll start with Vivica. Oh, go ahead, Coretta.
Okay. So my private practice is the People Place Counseling Center. Unfortunately, I'm not accepting any clients right now, but I do have 4 other therapists that would gladly partner with you on your process. So you can reach out to us. Our contact number is 479-321-2818. And that's the People Place Counseling Center. And we're right in Bentonville, Arkansas.
And I'm
And
gonna have you say the number again. I'm gonna pay the People Place, and what was that number?
It's 479-321-2818.
Okay. And Vivica.
Yeah, so I am in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My practice is called Forward Moving Counseling Services. I am also not accepting new clients and probably until January. But I do have 4 other therapists, look at that, Coretta, that works under me that are accepting new clients that we can make sure that we get you scheduled with. All 4 of them offer in-person and virtual sessions if you're in Louisiana. And my website is forwardmovingcounseling.com. There is an inquiry form that you can complete on that website that will go to my assistant, and they will contact you and get you connected for services if you need them.
Oh,
And
I
if
guess I
we
should.
can't get you services, I'm a person, if you call my office, we'll find services for you. We'll send you some referrals as well. And I think someone may ask about insurance. So my office accept Blue Cross Blue Shield and Aetna are the two that we accept.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies, so much for your time, for your wisdom, for your insight. I appreciate it. I won't say I won't call you again. I enjoyed it from the comments. I think people really were able to get some good information. So again, join us next week. I actually will be interviewing a police officer talking about how they handle their mental health and their stress and all of those types of things. I'm excited about that as well. Again, I appreciate you ladies so much. If you need me for anything, please let me know how I can help or assist. You guys, if you are watching, give a shout out to our guests. Please give some hearts, some fire, some love to our guests. Also, make sure you join us right back here next week, next Thursday, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, Minding My Mental Health, where we are tearing down the stigma of mental health treatment and bringing awareness to our community, hopefully one episode at a time. And so, again, I just want to thank you guys. Love you guys for watching. Thank you guys again, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.